Okay, so I have been doing research on the Neurosequential Theory, which was started by Bruce Perry. He wrote the book The Boy Who Was Raised as a Dog, and he starts at the beginning of his career and he goes through some of his professional experiences with different cases and talks about how they influenced his creation of the theory. So today we're going to focus on the physical effects of trauma on the brain and on the body, dissociative and hyperactive stress reactions, and then I'm going to give you the key to success for working with children. So first we're going to talk about the physical effects of trauma on the brain and on the body. Dr. Perry talks a lot about your primitive brain functions, and he describes how when we first are born, we start to develop those key fight or flight responses, are very emotional, need-driven responses, and off of those we start to develop more complex ideas. So when you look into further research to find supporting evidence, they've actually found that trauma makes the brain kind of stunt growth, so your brain will actually not get as large as it should. As well as when they start doing CT scans and things like that, they've found that you actually have less areas of your brain interacting when you have thoughts than if you have had trauma versus if you haven't had trauma. And then Dr. Perry also talks a lot about failure to thrive. So they've actually found that when you experience trauma at a young age and you don't get that initial connection with your caregivers, you will literally stop growing. You will have developmental delays. You may have trouble breathing because of lack of lung development, heart development, those types of things. So it's not just all mental, it's your whole body, everything is involved. So the way that we can counteract that now is to engage different areas of the brain by doing crossing that middle line, doing things with both the left and the right side, and developing this kind of involving your whole body and whatever it is that you're doing. That kind of helps combat that. And then he also talks a lot about skin-to-skin contact and physical touch, which is proven to stimulate the growth hormone, which will counteract failure to thrive and will kind of get your body back on board with that development. And okay, it's all right. We can start building on the things that we have. So very cool. Now we're going to talk about the dissociative versus hyperactive stress response. So the one that we see most and we get help for the most is hyperactive stress response, which is that kid in class that everybody thinks has ADHD and they're all over the place, they're aggressive, they're maybe throwing things across the room, maybe they're hitting their peers, maybe they're just jumping up and down, they can never sit still. That is actually a stress response. So when your body's exposed to trauma and you engage your fight response, you're going to see that hyperactive stress response come when they're in an environment that's triggering for them, and they're going to act out in that way. The other way that we can see the stress response is in a dissociative response, which we don't always catch because it is less in your face. These are the kids that are quiet, they are not talking to their peers, maybe they won't even engage with you. And a lot of times these are the kids that they have a huge imagination and they will just kind of detach from what's going on around them, and they will go into their own little world in their head to escape whatever reality they're in. So the next thing we're going to talk about is the biggest thing. Key to success when working with children is the relationship. So Dr. Perry says, what works best is anything that increases the quality and number of relationships in a child's life. So, and basically the idea here is that you can do any intervention that you want. There's 100 different things you can try. None of it's going to work if you don't have that initial connection with the child. They trust you, they know what to expect from you. so they can let their guard down and let those interventions do what they're supposed to do. So as teachers, what we can do is a lot of times we think, oh, we only have these kids for part of the day, they're still going to go home, their parents are going to do this and that. But like Dr. Perry says, if we give the kids an environment where they know what to expect, they know they can trust us, and they feel safe, they will start to develop. Even if they go home and they can't develop at home, they're still able to develop at school. So we can set clear boundaries, and we have to stick with them. We have to be predictable, so these kids come in and they may not like what they're having to do, but they know what they need to do, and they expect that from us. So it creates trust, and it allows them to let their guard down and start to learn and experience life more fully. And the easiest way to begin that relationship is to genuinely get to know your students. Take time to find out what they like, find out what, what's happened to them in their life, find out what makes them tick, why do they start getting hyperactive, why do they start dissociating, and what types of things can you do to help counteract that, what helps calm them down, what makes them feel good. And when you see those warning signs, do something to help them before they're completely dissociated or completely dysregulated and running all over the room. When you see them start to flip their pencil back and forth, stop and say, hey, let's take a break. Let's go for a walk. Let's, get up and do some jumping jacks, get some movement, and engage those different areas of the brain. But overall, the best thing that you can do for these kids is to just be there for them. Get to know them, be their friend, and make sure they know that you will always be there, and you will always act a certain way, and be a positive influence in their life, because that's truly the best way to get them to start developing those things they aren't getting at home. Alright, so today we went over the Neurosequential Theory, which was developed by Bruce Perry and has been backed by a lot of additional research since its initial beginning, which was very recent. So they've done brain scans and CT scans. If you're interested in that, the science is there. Look into it. We talked about the brain developing the most simple structures first and then building upon those. And we talked about so the physical effects of trauma. We covered that with the brain functions and all of that. And that again will be your MRIs and your CT scans. If you want to get a little better picture, go ahead and look that up. We talked about the two main stress responses, dissociative and hyperactivity, which again is that hyperactivity all over the place, dissociative is that real drawn in. And we talked about the importance of the relationship, which again, Dr. Perry says is the best thing that you can do for the kid is to have a really high quality relationship and have as many of them as possible.